I just wanted to welcome everyone and remind you that this meeting is being recorded. If you'd like to speak, there were some technical difficulties with some of the microphones on that side, but I think that that's been corrected. But again, just pressing the button with the red light indicating that you'd like to speak, and we hope that there won't be any glitches this evening. Okay. We will begin with our opening prayer. So if you can please join me with the sign of our faith. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. We come together in hope from different community groups, answering the same call to service, pieces of the same puzzle. We come together in gratitude for the trust placed in us, for the opportunity to serve, pieces of the same puzzle. We come together in respect, aware of our diversity, willing to work for the good, pieces of the same puzzle. We come together in awe of the wonder and beauty of each of God's children, pieces of the same puzzle. We come together in God's name, and as we work together toward the same goal, each piece of the puzzle begins to fit neatly into place, creating a breathtaking picture of love, compassion, courage, and grace. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen.
Alton, as we know it today,
is rich in the history and modern traditions
of many First Nations and the Métis,
from the lands of the Anishinaabe
to the Attawandaron,
the Haudenosaunee,
and the Métis.
These lands surrounding the Great Lakes
are steeped in Indigenous history.
As we gather today
on these treaty lands,
our Catholic social teachings
call us in solidarity
with our Indigenous brothers and sisters
to honor and respect
the four directions:
lands, waters, plants,
animals,
and ancestors
that walked before us.
All these wonderful elements of creation exist,
gifted to us by our Creator God.
We acknowledge and thank
the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation
for being stewards of this traditional territory.
And now I can move on to the approval of the agenda. And just some housekeeping items. When someone moves in seconds, can you please say your names so that it can be captured in taking of the minutes? I still hear an echo, but that's okay. And hard copies of the agendas are on everyone's tables, and laminated opening and closing prayers will be collected at the end of this meeting, so please leave them on the table for reuse. And at this point, I'll ask for an approval of the agenda, which I hope you had a chance.
Rick will second.
Okay, perfect. Any declarations of conflict of interest? This is just how I like it. Okay, so we do have two presentations this evening. The first is from Jennifer McDonald. She's no stranger to SEAC. You might have remembered her, I think the last time she was Harry Potter. This is her in regular dress. All right, yeah. So she'll be sharing with us a presentation on Empower, which is one of our literacy screening reading programs. So I invite Jennifer to come to the front.
All right, can everybody hear me? Oops. I just need one sec. Sorry about this. Okay. Just trying to, I know, for one moment, sorry about that. Trying to get into the presenter mode. I can just do that, yeah. Sure. Yep, thank you. All right, so thanks so much for having me here today. So I'm going to talk about our Empower Reading Program evaluation. So I'll just start by providing an overview of last year's program implementation and evaluation. So I'll go through some of our aims and our questions and methodology. Then I'll summarize the main findings from the evaluation in relation to each question that we asked, and I'll end with some key takeaways and possible next steps. Next slide. Thanks. So the 2022-23 school year saw continued system-wide implementation of Empower Reading, Decoding, and Spelling program for students in grades 2 to 5 with reading difficulties. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with it, but this is an evidence-based Tier 3 intervention from SEAC Kids involving intensive, systematic instruction in the foundational skills that are needed for reading. And that's done through consistently teaching and several decoding and word identification strategies. So we had trained Empower certs who were expected to deliver the program in small groups of about 5 to 6 students for 1 hour every day and going up to 90 to 110 lessons following the structured manual. And there was some fidelity monitoring and mentoring by SEAC Kids staff involved as well. So our board traditionally ran this program with certs who work at each school, so our school-based certs. But there was some anecdotal evidence from staff that they were not able necessarily to deliver the lessons each day or offer the full program dosage due to competing priorities that happen. So starting in 2021, our board introduced an itinerant cert delivery model, and that involved additional certs who were dedicated to Empower. So they traveled to around 4 schools each to deliver the program every day. And this approach was really designed to ensure daily program delivery without those typical interruptions that the school-based certs faced. So we did have the school-based model as well, continuing, and that was mainly with the slightly older students because the itinerant model's focus was on early intervention for those students in grades 2 to 3. Okay, so because of this fairly new itinerant approach, the Spec Ed team approached our research department about conducting an evaluation of this program. And this was the first year that we collected data for Empower in our board that I know of anyway, because we know from several studies that it is an evidence-based program and there's definitely positive outcomes for students. But the Spec Ed team wanted to focus on evaluating the itinerant delivery model, particularly student outcomes, like any gains in literacy skills or reading and confidence. So that relates to question 2 that you see there in orange. Is it beneficial for students to participate in Empower in our board with the itinerant model? But in our evaluation plan, we also asked a couple other overarching questions, basically to better understand the program's relevance, reach, and implementation, as well as investigate any differences in outcomes between the 2 delivery models. Next, please. And because of this there we go. So we developed an evaluation plan, and we did want it to be comprehensive. So we looked at multiple data types, as we often do. So demographic data to get more context, school and implementation process data to understand how the delivery went, perceptual data, and student learning data. We also used a variety of data sources, methods, and measures. And we do all this to basically understand the whole picture and triangulate the findings. Basically see where the evidence intersects, which also gives us more confidence in the results. So our methodology, I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this because there were quite a few data sources. So this slide basically shows the data sources that we use to understand the outcomes, and they're listed by data type, and they include the collection time points in parentheses, as well as the sample sizes for each delivery model. So you see the itinerant and then the school-based. So our first student learning data source, which is the one recommended by SEAC Kids, That was their 5 literacy assessments, or as it's called, SEAC Kids Screeners. And those were tests of letter, sound recognition, and word recognition. And they were collected by each cert 3 times. So we have pre or baseline, which was just before the program. The midpoint was around lesson 55 or halfway. And then the post was in June at the end of the program, usually after it was done, but there were a few cases where it was a little bit before that. And we did have amazing response rates thanks to the certs. So we had pre and post data for 255 of the itinerant model students, and that was 100%. And we had 113 of the 122 students in the school-based model. I just wanted to note that the evaluation participants did not include students whose parents opted out because it was optional, or students who completed less than 90 lessons because they were demitted for any reason. We also collected reading achievement data from multiple time points. So those are reading levels, which were assessed by either classroom teachers or certs 3 times, and then I converted that to a standard scale. And then we also retrieved final report card marks. That was from both June 2022 and June 2023 for most of the Empower students. And those were specifically reading strand report card marks, which we had last year, and I don't think we do moving forward. But so that was the achievement data. As for perceptual data, we administered voluntary surveys to the Empower students, parents, and certs. So for example, our Empower student questionnaire had just a few questions about attitudes towards reading, and those came from a few older versions of the EQAO questionnaire. And the certs read those questions out loud, which enabled us to compare the responses from both before and after the program for most of our students to see if things like their confidence or interest in reading changed over time. Those response rates were fairly high, 90% and 60% for the 2 groups. And at the end of the program, we also collected feedback from several parents and guardians on an anonymous survey, as well as certs. Next slide. All right, so now we're going to get into the findings. So our first evaluation question, was there a need for the program? Who did it reach, and how well was it implemented? In terms of need or relevance, we looked at different documents suggesting that offering a Tier 3 reading intervention for students is aligned with board and provincial priorities and is necessary for students who require intensive reading supports. Some of those documents included the Right to Read report, of course, and our own HCDSB strategic plan, which had alignment with some of our pillars like foundational elements and achieving. And it was the only Tier 3 reading intervention that we did offer in the board. So for REACH, the program reached at least sorry, if you can go back. Oh, no, we're good. Sorry. The program reached at least 377 students at all 46 of our HCDSB elementary schools. So you can see the minimum counts for the schools, certs, and students below those images. And I just wanted to note that those counts are based on available data from the certs, and it just includes those who are eligible for the evaluation. So it excluded classroom teachers who had Empower groups or any students that had participated in the program for a second time, as well as students, as I said, that opted out or were demitted. So you can see there that the itinerant model was in 44 schools, and they had 12 certs and 255 students. So you'll notice that this model had more schools and students than the 22 school-based certs because they did run a few Empower groups per day in multiple schools, and the school-based certs were just at one school, usually about one group. Slide. So this chart just shows the number of participating students in each delivery model and grade. So the orange columns are the itinerant model, and you could see that it's mostly students in the primary division, and then there were slightly more junior division students in the school-based model. And overall, just over half of the students were in grade 3. Right, so then we looked at implementation, and we found that there was evidence of implementation fidelity, at least regarding group size and number of lessons. So we had 5 to 6 students per group on average, which is what we wanted. And the Empower student groups in the itinerant model completed around 106 lessons on average. It ranged from 75 to 110, the max. And then the school-based Empower groups completed around 101 lessons, ranging from 68 to 110. And I wanted to point out some limitations. There's always limitations to these kinds of things, but they do apply to both models, of course. So the lesson counts were self-reported, and they may have been provided a little bit early. As I said, they had until the end of June with the students, but we needed some data a bit early. Also, we didn't ask about the number of hours, so there's no guarantees that the lessons were the full hour. It could have been condensed potentially into like a smaller time frame within the time. Is that working? No. There we go. Okay, and if you can see below the image there, we also collected some feedback from certs about what went well and challenges that they faced. And we did find some common themes. So just some of the strengths to program delivery. Oh, sorry. Did you need something? Good. Okay, sorry. Some of the strengths to program. All right, thank you. So some of the strengths included having consistent time or space to deliver the lessons, and the Empower lesson structure itself was apparently quite easy to implement and helpful for the students. And some of the challenges mentioned were mainly student related. So there were a lot of absences last year. I think it was like 13 missed lessons per child or something like that on average. And then there was lack of cohesive groupings in some cases, or there were some issues related to scheduling or disruptions. Next slide. And then we also looked at perceptions of satisfaction. That kind of helped us determine how things went. And the data suggested that participants found the program to be valuable. So on the post-student questionnaire, we asked broadly, what did you think about Empower? And most participants had positive comments about the program, indicating that they liked and used the Empower strategies, that the program helped them with reading, or they found it engaging or fun. So I just have a couple of quotes there. I don't know if you can see them. I liked Empower and learning how to read. I used to not be able to read, and now I can read. My favorite one is sounding out because you get to read the word. And then another, it's good, fun, and I like it. And our parents and guardians indicated that their child enjoyed participating in Empower. We had 92% agreement with that item. And they felt the program was valuable for their child. So 98% said quite or extremely valuable. And most of our open-ended comments were also very positive. And one example is there. This is an excellent program, and I have seen a great improvement in her reading. And then it went on to say, I highly recommend for the school to continue with this program. Next slide. So for our second question, that was the one that I mentioned was the main focus of our evaluation and where we looked at student outcomes for the itinerant model specifically. So first we looked at improvements in foundational literacy skills, and we tracked average scores or percent correct on the SICK Kids screeners at the 3 time points. And we found that itinerant Empower students significantly improved from pre to post on all 5 of the SICK Kids screeners. And it's kind of a small graph, but it's just kind of showing those growth trends. Each line is for a different test. So we could see, for example, the dark line at the bottom, that's the challenge word test. The students went from getting just 11% of the items correct to 41% at midpoint, and then finally 73% at post. And that was actually the lowest score of all of those at post. Like the letter sound identification task had this 98% correct, for example. And we did find that the youngest students made the largest gains, especially the grade 2s. It's not working again, but. All right, so next we looked at improvements in reading levels and marks. So for reading levels, after participating in Empower, 46% of our students were reading at grade level, compared to just 1 student at the beginning of the school year. And again, we found the greatest growth in the primary division and with grade 2 students. And then with the final reading strand report card marks, we had more itinerant model students achieve level 3 or 4 after the program compared to before, significantly more. And this was the case for both divisions. And then we also looked at like specific marks that I had to convert to a 12-point scale. And we found that most students had marks that went up, or more students that had marks that went up than went down or stayed the same. and average marks were significantly higher over time with high magnitude differences. Next slide, if it works. All right. So then we looked at positive reading attitudes and behaviors, and there were consistent findings related to students' attitudes and behaviors from the different stakeholder groups. So feedback from students, parents, and Empower certs all suggested that students like to read more and had more positive perceptions of their reading abilities after participating in Empower. So for students, there were statistically significant increases in their reported interest and confidence in reading from pre to post, and that's kind of depicted in the chart there. So we can see how it went from before the program. So for example, in the middle, 42% said that they think they're a good reader most of the time, and that increased to 65% after participating. And we had another question that we asked, and we found that most students said that they use Empower strategies most of the time. And for parents and guardians, nearly all of our respondents indicated that after participating in Empower, their child enjoyed reading, they were confident in reading, and they experienced improvements in independence. And this was actually reflected in both the closed and open-ended questions. And then we had comments from certs that revealed that there were two main themes about positive changes or growth that they observed with their students. The number one was confidence. All of our respondents, our certs, said that the students gained confidence, and then we had several that said that they improved in their decoding and reading ability. All right, so I'm just going to move on to the school-based findings. So I talked about the itinerant model findings. As I said, that was the emphasis, but we did the same investigations for the school-based model participants in order to help us consider any differences between the two models. And we found that, yeah, the findings were very similar with significant increases over time in all of the main outcome areas. So by the end of the program, students in the school-based model had significant pre-post improvements in their literacy skills, so those SEAC Kids assessments. And again, it's a tiny graph, but you can just kind of see the trends. Also, nearly a third of the school-based model students were reading at grade level compared to none at baseline. And then the reading strand marks also went up. And students also reported more interest in reading and a lot more confidence, as shown in the chart there. Next slide. And then to compare the two models, so on implementation, students in both the itinerant and school-based delivery models completed an average of over 100 lessons, but there weren't any significant differences between the groups. So there weren't any differences between the delivery model and their ability to reach the 90 lesson minimum or to complete all of the lessons. But again, we have that limitation that I mentioned earlier, that we don't really know if a lesson does equate to an hour. For student learning gains, students in both models demonstrated significant improvements from pre to post in foundational literacy skills, reading levels, and reading marks. And they showed more interest and confidence in reading after participating. And now looking at the differences, students in both models had similar growth on the SEAC Kids assessments. And you couldn't really see the numbers, but the average post-screener scores were higher for the itinerant model students, but that was not statistically significantly higher. But improvements were significantly greater for itinerant model students in our measures of reading achievement and interest and confidence. So I guess it's not working. If you can go to the next slide if it's there. All right. I just wanted to end with a few key takeaways. So to summarize, from this evaluation, it appears that the program was relevant to implement. It reached several students in need of service. It was implemented well, and it was seen as having value. We also found that the program resulted in several positive learning outcomes. So it was effective in improving students' foundational literacy skills and achievement in reading. It also resulted in other positive outcomes in growth, such as more confidence and interest in reading and use of Empower strategies. Finally, I have some nice pictures here, but you can't see them. One of the certs shared them with me. The evaluation suggested that there were improvements for students in both the itinerant and school-based cert delivery models. Although students in the itinerant model did experience more growth than those in the school-based model in a few areas that I mentioned. Okay, so I'm on to my conclusion slide. Is that going to work? No. Anyway, we concluded that it would be beneficial for the HCDSB community if we continue to offer the Empower Reading program in future years with either the school-based or itinerant model, especially given those positive perceptions of the program and the major gains in literacy skills and reading assessments that we saw in both delivery models. The only thing is, as both models resulted in student gains, we recommended that the cost of sustaining both those models should really be the main consideration moving forward. And I know there's still discussion required and decisions by the special education team, but some next steps might include determining how we can leverage some of those strengths of the itinerant model in a cost-effective way. So we also suggested maybe doing some more implementation monitoring, and that could include collecting CERT feedback on what's working and not working. And I guess the idea is it will help ensure the program is delivered effectively and continues to have a positive impact on our students. And that was all I had. And I wanted to thank you so much for your time, and sorry about the technical difficulties. I must be jinxing it or something. But I also wanted to take this time to thank everybody involved in the data collection, especially the Empower certs, who they were very committed to the evaluation. They sent me a lot of data. I really appreciate that. And of course, all of the students and their families. And I want to acknowledge my research colleagues as well. So thank you very much. And I welcome any questions you have.
Thank you, Jennifer. I don't know if there are any questions. Funny enough, you can access everything if you log in online, but for some reason our technology in the boardroom isn't cooperating. But I think that the sentiment and the impact of Empower has rung through in your presentation. So I don't know if there are any. Oh, Director Klein.
This partnership is one that's used at or followed at other boards as well. It's invaluable. So there are many other directors, many other superintendents and SEAC chairs that are aware of this at boards. And it's, I think it's a brilliant example of partnership. It's rooted in science and rooted, you can't get a better, well, maybe you could, but the partnership with SICK kids is pretty phenomenal. And it's again, something that's steeped in data. And so you can see actual growth, and it actually also empowers our teachers because they learn more about the needs of the students, and again, some basic literacy pedagogy as well. So thank you very much for this.
Thank you.
May I? Yeah, very great, like interesting research actually to see. Like I do teach it as part of my profession too. It would be a dream job just to be able to teach all day without interruptions. But I think the cost effectiveness of it, maybe the search in school have other pressing obligations that they have to attend to. And perhaps that's the reason why they get to deliver less number of lessons, right? I don't know if that's in the school's able to control that. I know that hiring an itinerant cert just to do the job isn't the most cost effective way. And for students to have an adult in school who actually delivers the models to grade. But this is very, I would never thought about having this kind of research done. This was really interesting research to see. Thank you.
Yeah, so a couple of questions. So I did have, and I'm sorry if I missed it because I couldn't follow this. But in the conclusion, in the summary, was there some indications as to why the itinerant model did work better than in some of those areas where it was more successful in some of those areas with respect to outcomes versus the teacher-led model?
There weren't any indication. The only thing that I speculated was that because we didn't ask for number of hours and we only asked number of lessons, it's possible that even though like a school-based cert said they delivered one lesson, that lesson could have been cut short because they were interrupted like several times. So, I mean, that's something that we would have to think about for future data collection, just to find out if that was the case. But I'm not sure. We weren't evaluating, obviously, the staff. We were like looking at the differences between the models. So I'm not sure if there were any other factors that contributed to that.
I was just curious because I think when you look forward at delivery models, I think it is important to understand why some delivery models were more successful in some areas than other. I think that will help you with your determination as to which way you go. So understanding it wasn't part of this, but I do think it's important so that if you decide to move forward, one way or the other, that, there's a general understanding about, why one did sort of better than the other. I think that would be important when you sort of make that determination.
Right.
And so is the thought then that the idea would be to move this model forward, continue it, but move it forward without the classroom teacher, with just interns delivering it, or to continue with this model of having both deliver the reading program?
Thank you. I think that's a question for Superintendent Jack Caldera. I'm not making that decision. I'm sorry.
So I'll take my chair hat off and this was the invaluable piece about getting this kind of data, that we were able to see what the impact was for the both levels of support. To be honest, there is a financial commitment, and we know that we're in times where there may be some financial constraint. That being said, we wanted to, I would like to, with some of our smaller school populations, we do have less staff available to deliver a model such as Empower. So if there was a hybrid, I know that was a dirty word during COVID, but if there was a model where we would have, because we do see similar results with the in-school certs, school-based certs, as well as with the Empower certs, I would certainly look at the demographics and also look at the staffing complement so that we could protect the Empower program in whoever is delivering it. Currently, we do have the Empower certs going to 4 different schools a day, and while they are delivering the same program, it is a challenge getting from school to school to school, and there are challenges with that model as well. So I think we are looking at the data. We're one of the boards that does, when the ministry released the need for early screeners, we were like, check, been there, done, or like we're doing that. So we didn't have to introduce or find a program, and we have a really great relationship with SEAC Kids. So we want to maintain that and build on the high yield results that we are seeing. But I think, if I'm honest, somewhere, looking at the 2 models and being responsive to the communities that we're serving will be the best approach. So.
So just so I understand, so it sounds like there's a cost to administer the program over and above regular operating costs?
To clarify, there's training involved that's delivered through SEAC Kids, so there's a cost for the training, and then the individuals who are only doing the Empower program, the traveling traveling Empower certs, there's some additional costs that would be outside of what a school-based cert would be, but that's not the only driving decision making around it. And I don't know if Denise, did you have your hand up? No. Sorry, I saw a wave. Yeah.
Okay, so just in that case, because if it is such a successful program, like I've heard about the program for maybe about 5 years now, so I'm just interesting how I'm hearing about it. It feels like if it was very successful, like it would be opportunity to implement it a little bit more, integrate it a little bit more into like the day-to-day. So I'm wondering if there is opportunity for that in terms of integrating it into just daily, our actual curriculum that we use, and so it doesn't become a separate program, it just becomes part of our curriculum, because it'd be great for all the kids to be able to benefit from such a great program versus having just handfuls of kids based on who's available and the investment in the intern certs that can travel.
Yeah, and I think the intention of the program is as an early screener to kind of target, but the beauty of being exposed to it both at the school level and a school-based level, as well as the traveling, there's capacity building that's taking place, and so there's conversations, and it's informing what's happening in the classrooms as well. So kind of organically, as opposed to every teacher in grade 2 teaching Empower to all the students, but that's great feedback. And Jennifer has some. Yeah.
So the actual Empower program is a tier 3 intervention, and it does require 1 hour of very targeted instruction on a daily, 5 days a week. However, there are what they call Empower strategies. So when certs are working with a student who is in the Empower program, they do make the classroom teachers aware of some of the strategies. So although they might not be getting the tier 3 targeted intervention because of the intensity of it and the fact that it is a tier 3 intervention program, they are continuing to use the types of strategies that they're working on in the Empower program. So the regular classroom teachers are encouraging all the students to use some of those strategies throughout the day.
Any other questions? I'd like to give a good pause so that everyone, my classroom teacher experience. So thanks again, Jennifer, for doing this presentation for us.
No problem.
And
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we look forward to the next, whatever the next opportunity we have. You will grab you to come in.
Thanks.
Thank you. Our next presentation is from Anita Bader, one of our consultants, and Jen Thompson, our special education coordinator. And as promised, we wanted to give you some updates on our independence rubrics. And in our presentation today is called Building Independence in Students with Special Education Needs. So I'll turn it around. I know you were assisting with the tech, but oh, perfect. So here we go.
Yeah, so I thought I had the power, and then all of a sudden I realized I didn't really have the power because it still wasn't working. So funny enough, there is a little video in this. I think I might just skip it because I feel like I'm just going to jinx it if I play it. So thank you for having us this evening. I know we have done some independence presentations in the past, and we really kind of just wanted to start with that idea of independence. So I know when you received the package, you did receive a copy of the article called The Golden Rule of Providing Support in Inclusive Classrooms. Support others as you would wish to be supported. I didn't want to take the time, obviously, to go through that whole article with you today, but it was an article that was through the Council for Exceptional Children. You can just switch slides, Margaret. Thank you. And it was really, really well written, and there's a lot of really good research around independence. And I just pulled out some of kind of the key findings from that particular article. And it really is around adult support. And I'm not going to read all of these to you, but it really is around the idea that adult support really does need to be very intentional with our students. And that a lot of times we actually over support with adults because it is actually peer interaction. We can sometimes interfere with that natural peer interaction that our students need. So in order to build independence, we also need to have a plan for fading that support out. And that is something that's really important to us here in our board. And we talk a lot about fading support, and we have fading support plans for our students. You can move on now. And the next one, that's just the article. And so what we do know is that when we have support that encourages independence and interdependence, that is actually what best prepares our students for when they leave us. So post 21 or post 18, whenever it is that they leave us, it helps them to have great opportunities when it comes to living situations, to jobs, even if they're going into a group home. So the more that we can prepare them and plan to decrease the amount of support that they have from, that kind of one-on-one support, the more likely that they are to have success. And it's really important to not underestimate the power of peers. So actually peers can do a lot for our students, and we have some great programs in the board. We start as young as kindergarten with Stay, Play, and Talk, where we really focus on using peers to do some of that supporting and prompting with our students. And what we do right now really matters in terms of independence for them in the future. So I was going to play this. I don't know if we should give it a shot. I think we might just skip it, but if you can always watch it later on. It is a little video. It's not that long, and it really is about a student, and it shows you how that adult support can interfere with peer support and natural environment. And the student in it actually talks about that at the end, and how it was really important to be able to have some of that independence. But I will skip it just in lieu of the. So when do we start building independence? We really want to start that as early as possible, and we do start it as early as kindergarten, trying to build some of those independent skills. And the other thing that we do is we use a wraparound support to be able to do that. So if you can just flip, Margaret, there we go. So there are many people that our students encounter on a daily basis. They have their teacher, the CERT, we have community partners, we have itinerants. peers, child youth counselors, we have administrators, we have our speech and language department, our OTs, our PTs, our parents, our SLPs. So we really have a very comprehensive wraparound support for our students. And it is important that we utilize all of those people to interact with students on a daily basis so that they really aren't focused on having one person do everything for them all the time. So as part of our process, what we do is we have an independence rubric process. And that particular process is the process that we use to look at student need and kind of figure out where are all the supports that they require throughout their day. And Anita's going to talk a little bit about that rubric process that we've been using now for a number of years.
So I think it started in 2015, where the first kind of revision that we started with the independence rubric. But as Jen mentioned, our goal is really to build that student independence as early as possible. And it's through this independence rubric process that where as a school team, we are able to identify and capture the student needs in a school setting. So next slide, please. So the completion of the independence rubric is considered when a new student or a current student presents with concerns highlighted in the independence rubric. And this may require the support of an educational assistant. It may also be the support of a resource teacher. And the goal is always to build that student independence as much as possible. And as a school team, so that would be myself as a consultant, it would be the CERT, it would be our administration, it would be our classroom teacher that would be involved in this process, as well as our itinerant CERT. And we would look at our current data and the observations to support the completion of the independence rubric. Next slide, please. So in 2022 and 2023, the school year, revisions were made to the independence rubric, leading to the development of 2 separate rubrics. And that was more tailored to the elementary and secondary panels. We found that we needed to do 2 different rubrics to capture the student needs, both in elementary and secondary, especially as they move into co-op and the workplace. So the revision process is a collaborative and ongoing effort between the board and school staff, and we definitely take input from our schools to contribute to the refinement of the rubric, and it is an ongoing process. Next slide, please. So this year, what we did is we actually rebranded the independence rubric to incorporate and embed some of our pillars of achieving, believing, and belonging. And with the new multi-year strategic plan that has come out, and we already rebranded it, but we will be including the pillar becoming to continue to guide our work. So the independence rubric assesses the student's level of independence in 6 domains. So under the pillar of achieving, we broke it down to functional communication and academics. Under believing, we broke it down to community, leisure, and work skills. And under belonging, we assess the student's safety, their adaptive functioning skills, as well as their social emotional skills. So the rubric considers independence in 6 domains in terms of 4 levels of achievement. And level 1, you will see we broke it down so that you will be able to see some of the terms that we use within the independence rubric. So level 1 is more of that awareness piece. The student is fully dependent on staff. They rarely interact appropriately. They do need those physical prompts and assistance. Level 2 is the students are emerging and developing some of those independent skills. They may have some shared support. They might need some partial physical assistance. Level 3, the student is acquiring and consolidating some of those skills. So what they might need is more monitoring and check-ins from the educational assistant or staff. They might need some prompting. They interact appropriately, regularly, and they might need some verbal or gestural assistance throughout their day. And then of course, level 4 is that they've generalized the skill over a variety of settings. They have a high degree of independence. They're able to access their visual support systems and strategies, and they don't need any more support at this time. So in each of the 6 domains, the students are really assessed and categorized based on level 1, 2, 3, or 4. And the 4 levels really represent how much support a student requires in school based on each of the 6 domains. So as I said, like for level 1, a student might need significant support, but at level 4, they don't require that much support because they've already achieved that independent kind of piece. In each of those domains, there are subcategories. So I brought a sample, and we can definitely share this with you if you would like a copy, but there are subcategories within each of the 6 domains, and the appropriate level is then determined for each of those domains. Next slide. One thing I just wanted to mention too is that we do use an electronic platform in order to complete the independence rubric, and it's done through Teams. And then with the help of research, we're able to capture that data and that analysis moving forward. So linking the independence rubric to the IEP is a really important component to building student independence. School teams continue to use information from the completed independence rubric to identify and develop goals for each student. Students with an IEP also have targeted goals, and that is reported and assessed for each term. And then a transition plan that matches that area of need that is indicated on the independence rubric. The IEP and the independence rubric are used for discussions around independence, transition planning, pathways, and human resources. And we encourage our school teams to collaborate with parents to really jointly identify potential areas of and try to embed some of those goals into an alternative goal within the student's IEP. Next slide. So this slide just captures the number of independence rubrics that have been completed over the years. You will see that on average, we have completed approximately 69 additional rubrics each year. And again, this process begins in February and ends in May. And what we do is that we do this all over again in September in order to capture those students who have registered after May when we have completed the independence rubric process. Next slide.
So this is where I am. So when we complete all of these independence rubrics, like Anita said, we kind of do it from February to May. And part of that is part of our collective agreement and making sure that EAs know their placement for the following year. What it does is it runs through an algorithm actually based on a finite number of EAs that we have on the board. And then all of the students who are at a school help to generate a certain number or a certain amount of EA support for that particular school. And then that number is given to the principal, and we don't assign the EA support necessarily directly to a student. We assign it to the school because we know that students throughout a day, a week, a month, a year, the amount of support that they might need changes all the time. So one day they might not need any support, but you have another student who really needs it. And so the principal then has the flexibility to be able to kind of move that support around in the building as it's required for all of the students. And so one of the things that, over time as we've been doing this process is that we do have some students. So this is a very few number of students in the board, but students who at times do require more than one person with them. And so there was a process in place, and it was called the SIP process. And SIP is special funding that comes from the Ministry of Education. If you can just flip to the next slide there. So historically, we have submitted these on a yearly basis, and we have submitted these to capture these particular students. For this year, the ministry is actually not requiring boards to submit anything for SIP funding. They are providing us with an amount of money, but they're not requiring us to submit timetables and all of those things. And so we are still responsible for allocating the human resources based on student need. And we actually don't know what that SIP process is going to look like moving forward because they are under review for it right now. And they're trying to come up with a new process because there were a lot of issues with it. So in the past, we kind of used the student timetable that the SIP process was generating. And we were giving schools an additional, sometimes it was 0.5, sometimes it was 1.0, but there wasn't really a good way to determine the amount of support that that a student might need that we could then allocate to the school. It was kind of a bit of a general timetable, and it generated a money amount, but not a support amount. So this year, you can just flip to the next one, Margaret. So this year we've created a new process called the student narrative process. So we continue to fill out the independence rubrics for all of our students. And then this year, for any students who are more complex, who would require 2 educational assistants throughout their day, and that could be for various reasons. It could be for, lifting during toileting. Like there's all kinds of reasons a student may require more than one person to support them throughout the day. Our teams are now able to fill out a timetable, which we've worked in collaboration with research on, which will then add to the amount that they generate through their initial independence rubric. So it's a much more refined and kind of accurate representation based on their timetable of this year. Like how often through the day are they actually accessing 2 EAs? Is it just for 30 minutes? Is it all day long? So, and then it will generate a more accurate amount of support to be able to give back to that school, to be able to support them better. And we do plan to continue, even if SIP comes next year with, a whole bunch of new requirements. That's really just the funding portion. But we do plan to continue on with this process because we do think it will help schools to receive more accurate amounts of support that they might need.
So part of the additional school EA allotment, as Jen was saying, is really based on the current needs that is reflected in the student timetable. And staff that are really counted in that timetable will include educational assistants as well as CERT time that the student is seeing the CERT. And we broke it down into a 360-minute school day for secondary and 390-minute school day
list, and a lot of registrations, more than we've ever had in the past, come in kind of after that May. And so that's why we decided to redo the allocation in October. But next year, knowing that and knowing that the process actually worked out well, when we are looking at, all of any reorganization that happens, we're going to do this in September next year so that we're capturing those kids right away. So all the kids who registered in May, June, July, August, even who just show up right at the beginning of September, we're going to capture them kind of middle of September when a lot of the other reorganization happens, just to make sure that the schools have the support, especially a school who may get 5 new students register, right? That becomes very difficult then to try to allocate the support that's in their building. So we're making sure we're capturing some of those students as well as students who don't show up at schools as well. So removing that support and putting it into buildings that have new students. And I think that is it. There we go.
Welcome any questions that you might have.
This is always a tricky, conversation, but I do want to say that thank you to the team. We had quite an increase of needs in September, October, and so the work that takes, February to May, we did in 3 days because it was important to capture the students who had moved into the area, and emerging needs needed to be responded to. But I will open it up for questions. And no one. Okay.
So if anybody else wants to
Go for it.
yeah, go ahead. I've got it.
Okay, cool. So one of my questions is, if you're doing the observations or the analysis in February to May, just from what we know with student development, it just seems to me that it's a strange time of year, because by the time the student goes through summer, perhaps camp, they mature, they come back in the fall, their needs may be completely different. And then I guess you layered on by explaining that there may be new emerging needs as well that come in. So it just seems, I guess, coming from a position of not seeing the program in the past, an odd time of year to do it.
Yeah, we start in February because it takes a long time to get to all the schools and go through all of the students who might require support. And we do have to meet collective bargaining deadlines for EAs to know where they're going to be placed in September. And we really only have that amount of time to do it, which is actually why we're now going to redo it again in September. So if there are those new needs and we have a student who has a totally different profile than what we did initially, it gives us an opportunity to update that rubric as well. So not only can we add rubrics on or take rubrics away, but we can also update rubrics if we feel that a student comes in with a totally different profile based on changes over the summer, more independence or less. So we do have the ability to do that. And we did do that for a few students this year as well. Yeah, no problem.
Sure. Yes.
Just to follow up on that, then wouldn't that change your EA assignment?
Yeah, so it's a twofold kind of process. So there's a date in May, I'm not sure exactly what the date is. They have to know where they are in September, a placement. But then once the new year starts, there's a different procedure for being able to transfer. So there's just 2 different procedures that they have to use, and they have to follow the right deadline. So we can do transfers in September or October, but they just have to follow a different procedure based on the collective bargaining agreement. Yeah.
And I think, not to jump, we capture in February a lot of our new registrants for kindergarten. Mm-hmm. So it does drive some of our, data because it's nice timing when the registration opens. So we do extend it kind of in sync with that. But you have the floor.
Okay, a couple things. So I'm going to work back a little bit. So can I just talk about the student narrative for a second?
Yeah.
So my understanding on the student narrative was a little different, and I'm curious to understand why this is being tied to complex kids. Just
yeah.
One. So why it's being tied to complex kids only? Because I'm not understand. I understand the previous SIP process. Mm-hmm. I don't know why it's being tied into SIP now. The student narrative should focus on a bunch of things that are not just specific to complex students. They may impact a student who's not as complex, who has support, who doesn't necessarily need another additional person, but may require additional support. And the student narrative should be something that speaks to those items that are not captured clearly in the independence rubric. So we talk about things like socialization, friendships, peers, mental health, those types of pieces. So those shouldn't be relegated to a student with complex.
Yeah, so maybe complex isn't the right. So SIP was, it was really a way to capture it was a new way to capture the students who historically or typically would have been SIP students, because the ministry has asked us to come up with a way to continue to allocate human resources to students who were previously SIP students, which actually, when it was SIP, it was for students who required, actually the verbiage then was more than 2 educational assistants in a day. That was the SIP. We recognize that, actually the challenge for schools is actually when they require even 2, not just more than 2. And so that's why when we, created the process. So this particular process is meant to really look at our students who just require a way to allocate support for students who require more than 1 full-time EA. We have a third process, which we didn't talk about today because it's not quite finished. We're working on it, and it's actually a school narrative process. And so that particular one is where we can look at the complement of a school in a less quantitative but more qualitative way. So it's when we have, we may have students in that particular school who have needs, like you said, that aren't maybe necessarily captured on the rubric. They may have, multiple students who might be a level 1 who maybe aren't allocated full-time support because of the finite number of EAs that we have. And so let's say they have 5 of those students in their building. We then have a student narrative process that would then allow that school to receive some extra support to kind of meet the needs of those particular students who, maybe didn't generate full-time support, but need that little bit of extra support. And so it is a much more qualitative process as opposed to quantitative process, which we're working with on research right now. So we've come up with a list of kind of all of those things that you mentioned there, Brenda. So it might be a student who, needs extra support outside of school hours. So who might need educational assistance support while they're riding a bus. But we don't capture that necessarily on our rubric. It might be for a student who needs, who is only getting a limited amount, but needs a little bit extra. So we have a process that we're using. Again, we haven't fully developed the process, but we will have it in place for this year. We're just in works with research right now to continue to develop that kind of narrative and qualitative list of things. And it will have, some discretionary pieces to it, because we know it's not black and white with students and support. It can't always be a number, and we recognize that. So the process that we shared with you today really was for the intention of replacing the SIP process, as the ministry has asked us to do that and find out a way to give those students who require additional support on top of what they generate through the independence rubric.
So I recognize that, and I thank you for that explanation. The student narrative should not be tied to SIP. The student narrative is a student narrative, and respectfully, I understand a school narrative. A school narrative will never capture what a student has to say. We know that our teams are stretched. We know that students have a lot of things going on. A student narrative should not be tied to someone who needs, more than 1. You may have a student who, for all intents and purposes, falls in a certain place in those categories, but again, they struggle heavily with socialization, or they struggle with other pieces that are impacting things, and that an EA may require that support. And maybe the only way to know that is to talk to the student about what their priorities are based on this independence rubric. And we know that our student census data has shown us that a high percentage of students in our high schools do not feel safe. They do not feel a sense of belonging. So this has to be a way for us to talk to those students, understand what their needs are, understand why they're not being supported or not feeling supported or not being safe, What are those mechanisms that we can put in place to do that with? And that is only going to come through in a student narrative by talking to the student and finding out what that is. You can couple that with the school narrative, but this student narrative should not be for students who require more than one EA. It should be for any student who has an independence rubric that wants to put forward a student narrative. And also, respectfully, I don't think it should only be up to the CERT or the school team to make a determination on what students get to submit a student narrative. It should not be a selective process. Every student should have the chance to submit a student narrative as part of this independent rubric process. That's my opinion. You can comment on it. I have other questions.
I think, as we talked about at the beginning, the wraparound supports, because we do have other, for school mental health, we have social workers, CYCs, itinerants. We do mobilize a lot of the other resources based on the need, but your point about student voice is well taken. And like we mentioned earlier, we are trying to be as responsive as possible. I know in the past there wasn't a transparent process that we could speak to. It evolved, and there's been enough changeover in the department to really look at it with fresher eyes and looking at our current needs. So that was a big part of the work that we're doing, is constantly looking at our data, constantly trying to be responsive, and merging all the data points together to come up with a way of capturing the need. But I think we're talking about wraparound supports as well as how this component supports student need as well. So the EA support.
Right. You'll never understand fully what a student requires unless you talk to the student. And we've heard that loud and clear in our student census. We've heard that loud and clear. We've talked often and frequently at this table about nothing about us without us. So we have to find an opportunity for every student to have that student narrative. I understand from a systems perspective why it's tied into SIP. I'm disappointed to hear that that is part of the SIP piece, and not just because the student narrative is the right thing to do, because it is the right thing to do. We need to have a complete picture. We have to look at our students as whole people and look at them as whole persons. So I've said my comments. I'll continue to monitor and look at this and look for feedback and ask for updates on this, because as you can tell, I'm a little bit concerned about that, but I'm glad to see that the independence rubric is being reviewed. I think it needs to be reviewed more than once a year. I'm glad to hear that it's being done twice a year. I think that's important to capture those pieces and be as accurate as we can in our planning and in our staffing. I do have a question. When you spoke earlier, Jen, about the peer supports, and that was a very definitive line in the first slide that you put forward. I'd like to understand a little bit more about some of those peer support programs in our high schools, and I'd like to understand a little bit more about how those peer pieces are put in specifically to the rubric.
So we have, we don't just have the peer support in high schools. We do have two kind of main programs that are running. We have our one in kindergarten, which is called Stay Play and Talk. And in secondary, many of our schools, I believe all of our schools, are running the Best Buddies program. It's really around kind of being able to step away at times and have a lot of that peer interaction happening for our students. We do not have an evidence-based, research-based peer support program in secondary. We only have one of those in elementary at the time, or at the moment. We've had that one for how many years? About 7 or 8 years in elementary, but we do not have an evidence-based peer support program in secondary. What was the second part of your question?
No, so that answers it. And I would say again, given our student census information, that's probably something that we need to prioritize. I understand Best Buddies. I think it's a wonderful program. You'll see me come out and support as often as possible and talk about it. Best Buddies is very specific in how it creates opportunities for students in our high schools. There are many students who will not participate in Best Buddies, who want to have, and Trish probably understands, they want to be involved with other peers. They don't want to go to Best Buddy dances. They don't want to be a part of Best Buddies, not because it's a phenomenal program. But what are we doing in our high schools to create opportunities to be really connected with peers? What are we doing to facilitate those opportunities? First of all, are we finding out if those are important to our students? That's going to happen through the student narrative. The second piece is going to be, what are we doing to help them? Are we helping them get onto sports teams and clubs? And what are the things that we're doing in our high schools to create peer support opportunities outside of Best Buddies? Because Best Buddies is for a very specific group of individual students. And that doesn't serve all of our students in our schools who need to have that peer support piece. And we know it's lacking, and we've seen the data around that. So I think we need to be intentional in how we're going to do that. And I think it's imperative given what we're seeing in our data.
Yeah, and all of that census data for sure is important. And I know we've had a lot of discussions about all the different next steps that we need to take around that. And I know we just connected. I know you had a presentation on YAIJ to create some different spaces as well. As part of a bit of a response to some of the student data. It is up and running in a few of our schools. And we do have one high school, I believe, that is doing it. But again, we do definitely want to look at expanding some of those pieces in response to some of the data. And we have had a lot of discussions around some of the things that we can do, different training, different things we can look at bringing in as well.
Yeah, I would echo those sentiments. We really are looking at, especially in the new multi-year strategic plan and other accountability measures, about all the ways that our students have spoken to us. And we want to make sure that that voice is captured. There are a number of, opportunities between other departments as well. So program services, student success, pathways, we're all at the forefront of, okay, how are we going to move the needle? How are we going to ensure that we're capturing what the data is telling us in meaningful and authentic learning experiences and or in the socializing? Our student trustees have developed a survey, which was part of my report, but to capture how Best Buddies works and what are some strengths and what are some ways to improve it. So it's coming from the students who want to see how their data could be used to help inform us in our decision making. I know that it's challenging when we know that there are some students who are struggling in our school system. We recognize that. We're not shying away from that. We are facing the data face on, but we are taking, we think we're in the right direction, and we appreciate the feedback that we do receive in all the circles engage in, because that's how we're going to drive the change forward. And I know Jen's been on in the new role for the last couple of months, and it's half a year for me, but certainly not lost on me the work that we are compelled to do. So I know you have more questions, but there are a couple of others online, so if it's okay if I bounce back. So I think Rhonda had her hand up first. Oh, sorry, was answered. Oh, okay, and Brianna.
Hi, thanks.
You muted yourself again.
Sorry. I just want to say back on what Brenda was saying, that our student voice is extremely important and often overlooked during these processes. And then we talk about the Best Buddies program. I mentioned this in 2 meetings ago, that there is no Best Buddies at every high school. Assumption hasn't been able to get one up and running for the past 3 years. When they did start it, they were only able to actively get 6 students to be able to be part of the program because they didn't have students to pair them up with. And that's 6 students out of 3 life skills classes. So I think you can figure out what those numbers are. And these students often have no opportunity in high school to join councils, clubs, teams. There's a big disconnect for them. Like I said, they don't always want to go to a dance. They want to be with their peers, feeling like they're giving their voice and being able to do what their peers do, what they see every day that the other kids in high school get to participate in. And they never get to really have that same high school experience that their peers do. And again, they've expressed this in the data that the school board's already collected. And I just don't see how this is going to change. And I'm just looking for some feedback.
So again, we have that. I appreciate your feedback and your comments. We have been coordinating with the other departments. And we are really, like I said, it's not lost on us that this is the experience of some of our students. And I think that the commitment is that we are working in conjunction with other departments, because it's not just, we want to have opportunities that are authentic and that really do reflect, and recognize the potential for all of our students. So I know that we do have, for example, Special Olympics events that are put on, but those are in isolation, and we do want to see a transition where, school is accessible. We have, there's a rally cry to ensure that that's what's happening. And when we come here and we hear this feedback, it's not lost on us. We take it away. It drives our conversation and it drives our actions behind that conversation, so that we can respond to these student needs that you're bringing forward. Do I have a program right now to refer to? No, I don't, other than some of the other ideas. And each school community is different, and the school administrative teams are tasked with finding ways to really support the students in their communities. But I think there's been a lot of data, especially this particular year, that we're using to drive that decision making and that input. And when we revise a program like the school narratives, or when we're revising the program about independence rubrics, we're not holding anything back. We're showing you what we've come up with and seeking that feedback and that input, so that we can continually be connected to what the communities that we serve need. So I don't have a Band-Aid solution to some of the concerns that you're bringing. We do have opportunity to work with our school administrators and other departments, so that we can get this messaging across. And it is our commitment. It is the work that we're trying to drive forward. It's not going to be an answer that gives you a natural next step, but I do want to just emphasize that this is the work that we take these comments and this feedback. We have the student voice. We're looking for ways to ensure that that is not lost on all of the people, not just in the special education department, but within our board. And I think it's reflected in our multi-year strategic plan. We see it in our equity audit and in the work that we need to do in that area as well. And we're doing the 1 degree turn and trying to drive forward.
But I also know that Rhonda has, so I don't want to jump the queue if that's.
Go back to Brenda and then. Sorry. Hard to keep track. I can't wait to be done, Chair.
Ron, can I speak? Yeah. I think I'm like, my face is like, is it my face like 15 times its size in that boardroom right now? Kind of scaring me a little bit. Okay, so I wasn't going to say anything earlier, but I felt like we had already addressed what I was going to say, and then Brianna spoke, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to say what I was going to say. So I love that we're speaking about numbers and stats and rubrics and all that. It's all great, and I know that's what generates like services and programs. And I just feel like what Brenda was saying earlier is we do need to speak to the students, and a lot of the students who have the information are not going to the Special Olympics. They're not going to the dances. They're the students that are kind of in the middle, like the ones that are like hidden a bit, and they have the information for you. And I don't know if it's done through surveys or how you get at them to get their anecdotal information, but they have it for you in terms of what they need and how we can feel them more connected to their school, to their communities, to their people, to their teachers. Yeah. And I know we're not allowed are supposed to speak about anything personal, but I'm virtual, so I'm going to do it. My son, long time out of school now, and we went back into the parking lot recently, and he said, I have a tremendous amount of anxiety coming back to this parking lot. I'm not going to even say the school, any of that. And I said, why? And he said, just because, Mom, I struggled in school, and I had no idea. I really didn't realize he was struggling, not academically, but more socially. So I really feel that it's important for all of us here tonight, all of us who are supporting these students, to know that there are students who are, we're not actualizing or realizing what they need. And I don't know how to get at that information either, like where it comes from, whether it's just like interviewing them or talking to them or getting it. I don't know. So Brenda, if you want to chime in, I'm open to that conversation. But how do we get that information from these kids?
Well, I think one of the pieces is the student narrative.
Yeah.
And it comes back to that shouldn't be only for a select group of students, and it shouldn't only be tied to SIP information. I think that is a perfect opportunity to, at least once a year, to sit down with the student and give them an opportunity to put something that is going to be in a document that is going to be reviewed by multiple team members when putting together what those supports look like. And maybe it doesn't change the level of support they're getting, but maybe what that does is that informs the rest of the team what the priorities of that student are. So maybe it doesn't impact their EA numbers. Maybe it doesn't change it whatsoever. But all of a sudden we have a student narrative that says, I'd like to be on a sports team. I'd like to be in a club. I'd like to have lunch with people. I'd like to do this. I don't feel like I belong, or I don't feel like whatever. And all of a sudden you have a student narrative that is now attached to an IEP. It's in the, it's part of a file, and it's a conversation for the team to say, okay, this doesn't change our EA support level, but holy moly, this kid has identified that this stuff's going on and this is what they're thinking of, which ties into mental health, which ties into spec ed, which ties into some of these other pieces. And if we're looking for pieces like independence, I'll tell you, there's no better way for a kid to be independent, further to that first slide, than understanding if they have peer support. Do they have someone to go for lunch with? Do they have someone to walk down the hallway with? Do they have someone to do something with? We're not going to understand the level of that until we have this student narrative. And I also would also say that about, also only asking for narratives from students who are complex. Are you talking about students who are nonverbal? Are we talking about students who don't have, maybe the potential to communicate that in an effective way? Are we inviting parents then to assist them in writing that narrative? How are we soliciting that information from them so that we can have that information? If you're talking about it only being for complex kids, we know that some of our most complex students actually do struggle with articulation and speech and all of those pieces. So how are we going to elicit a fair narrative, and what's that going to look like from a support perspective? So Rhonda, to your point, I think we need to find a way for every student that at least in the state that is served by an IEP or as part of an independence rubric process to have that student narrative.
Yep. Yeah.
This is actually a and it might be actually in the naming of it, like just listening to everything that you're saying. So I think the intention of the process that we built was really just around more accurately allocating an amount of support to the school. And maybe we named it incorrectly. Maybe student narrative wasn't the right name for it. And I think the piece that you're talking about, Brenda, is something that maybe needs to be developed for inside of the school, for talking with those kids outside of how much support does the school get. And really that was the intention of this process, was to determine an amount of support more accurately that we give to a school that they can then allocate within the school. And maybe how they allocate it within the school would be more reflective of a narrative process that includes other components that, we haven't looked at a process like that inside of a school at this point, but I do think it is valid. And I think it's a really, I'm hearing you, and it is a really good, piece for us to take away. And maybe we did name this incorrectly. Like, we were trying to not call it SIP because it wasn't ministry, but really the intention of it was just to figure out how much support a school in general got more accurately. And I think maybe naming it student narrative is kind of maybe what the issue is here. And maybe we do need a student narrative process, but within the school, not so much at a board level as part of the EA allocation process.
Although you may need it at a board level because there may be changes in the EA placement as well. So it may end up being, I'm going to leave that to the experts, but you've heard, I think, from the realm here. And I do have a question too about parental involvement. I understand that the independence rubric, it's a school-driven process. Brendan Brown and I have had many conversations about the development of the independence rubric.
Yeah.
He's probably rolling over right now. But the question I do have is, are parents shown that rubric? Are they informed of the rubric? Do we talk about the process? Because I can tell you, I received questions throughout the entire year about EA support, and I constantly refer to the independence rubric, and parents say, what rubric? They've never heard of it. They've never seen it. So I'm wondering if that's something that is done on a routinely basis, and if it isn't, is it something that we should be doing?
Yeah, I can answer that. So it is an internal process that we have created. and parents are shown a copy of the independence rubric. They should be informed of that an independence rubric is being completed for their child. And it is part of the IEP process, especially at the beginning of September. So we have created more like an internal process around tips of completion of the independence rubric and how to tie it into the IEP. Are schools following it? We hope that they are, because we do see that joint value of having the parental input, especially when it comes to that alternative goal for building independence.
And when we do the independence rubrics, we do let parents know, and it is documented in the parent consultation log on the IEP that an independence rubric is being submitted and it is being done. And that's when the CERT has the opportunity to have those discussions. And any parent who's ever asked we've always shared it. So it's not, we're not trying to share it. And we do always let families know that an independence rubric is being done for sure.
Probably some education around that, because I can probably tell you anecdotally it is not being shared with parents, or they're not aware of it. They're not being told they have it. They don't know it exists. I mean, I've had these conversations with SEAC members as well. So I think an opportunity, as we talk about opportunities for education, people don't know. They don't know what it is. They don't know how it's developed. They don't know how allocations are made. They don't understand how their child fits into that, what the process is for that. So I would say that there's an opportunity there.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that out, Brenda. That was exactly what I wrote down, because I was like, the question I was going to ask afterwards when I step out of VA is, how do parents or how do kids register for this independence program? Are parents aware of that? I'm hearing this for the very first time, and any parent, because I prefer people to go and watch the meetings online, and like, okay, this is a resource. We didn't know that it's available. How can we benefit from that? So I think we need to let people know about this as well.
Yeah, and I think part of our capacity building this year is to make sure that that is the messaging, because it's being rebranded and then rebranded again, that there's going to be an opportunity. It's not going to be a one and done conversation for sure. I'm mindful of the time, and I know there are a couple other questions. Brianna had her hand up, and Trish would be following Brianna.
Again, I just agree with what everyone's saying about the independent rubric. And again, we put the onus on the schools to follow it, you're saying, and to let parents know. Just my own experience, I'm educated, I speak English very well, and my son was in the system for many, many years before I even knew what this was, and actually got to look at it, right, and be involved. So I don't think it's widely understood for parents. So I'm just wondering, when the school send a letter home saying, would you like to participate in your child's IPRC, and gives you that option, can it not be on that letter saying, again, the independence rubric will be, done on this child during such and such a date as well? Like, again, you send that letter home faithfully. So I'm just wondering, can it not be on that letter? So again, so it's at least informing parents of this, because there's nothing that actually I feel that comes out to parents to inform them about it. So unless you hear about it or know, or your school's actually actively letting parents know, it's very frustrating for parents. Like I said, they have no clue.
Thank you for that. I know for the IPRCs and the IPRC review that's ministry, those timelines are ministry mandated. So I'm glad to hear that they are being honored. And we'll take back that suggestion around how we can ensure that that messaging is clear. Like I said, we've done, kind of a do-over as far as how this process looked like in years past. And so this information will be really helpful for us to close any of those gaps. And
we are doing an independence rubric presentation to our CERTs at our February Family of Schools meeting, just to kind of go over the process again, the rubrics, how are we allocating support? And again, we can reiterate the importance of, when you're having those conversations, make sure you're able to answer questions, talking to each of the parents. It's not every student who's IPRC'd, obviously, that would even get an independence rubric, but making sure that when they are connecting with the families to let them know that they're able to answer questions or have conversations about that. It is like we said, it is an internal process. So we wouldn't have every parent come in. There just wouldn't be the time to be able to do that, but definitely the conversation. I mean, they're making the call anyways to talk about the fact that, they know, parents know that their children do have the support. And so having those conversations just around, answering any questions around the independence rubric would definitely be something that we can reiterate again at the Family of Schools meeting in February, as we're having it. And this is on our agenda.
Yeah, it's also in our joint meeting with administrators. So we are we're really trying to target all the audiences. Trish, you'll have the last word.
And just on a note to follow up on that, can you also, that if someone were shared?
Yeah. We will talk about it again.
Personal experience, it has not been shared.
We will talk about it again.
I have requested it and it was not. So that was quite a few years ago, but just to remind that as an option. So my actual question was going back to the process, if I understand, I'm hearing more, learning more, like you're saying, this is about designating the number of EAs, but if a parent does not approve or not approve, doesn't agree because they do know their child best. If they don't agree, what process is in place to not appeal, but can you challenge it? Can a parent come to you and say, you know what, my child's high functioning, but they really do require this support. I know my child best. How is that process?
So I think, again, that piece of it isn't from the board allocation process, which is what this process is. That would be more of a piece with the principal, because we're not allocating an amount to a student, we're allocating an amount to the school.
Right.
And we're just using this to try to give the school,
X
as
number.
accurate as an amount as we can, kind of based on these rubrics. But the allocation to the student, or how much student or support the student receives in the building, it really does come down to the principal, and that's why we give them an amount, not a student piece. So that would be more of a conversation with, if the parent feels like their child's needs aren't being met through all the different supports that are available, that conversation would happen at a school level, because they have their allotment or their allocation then to be able to kind of move that around based on the needs of the students in their buildings.
But if a parent, sorry to just challenge you, but if a parent says, goes to the principal and says that, and then the principal says, well, actually, based on your, all the data that we have here, they're not allocated. We're not allocated.
Yeah, and we don't actually even give them the individual allocations when we do this. Okay. They only get a school allocation. So when we don't break it down by student, again, this is just a very internal process for us to create that big number. So the principals just receive the final number. They don't receive an amount per student. So when they divvy out, or when they assign the support within their building, it's based on the lived and what's happening in the then, the there, and the now. For those students, and that's why they have the flexibility to move it. But we don't say this person got this much, this person got. We don't give it to them like that at all.
Okay, so they don't see like it's broken down.
No,
but your total is.
We just share them. We just share with them. Your school will have 12.5 EAs, and then with those 12.5 EAs, they then, based on, it could be groupings. Like, so another pieces that aren't accounted for, which is why we like to give the principal some flexibility, is they may have a student who maybe only generated half, but that principal knows they need a full. Well, they can use that, and then they may have two students who each got a half, but maybe they're together and they can just share that half. So that's why we don't give them, an amount per student, and we do it as a school total for the principals. And so those conversations would happen at the school level if a student is, if a parent is not feeling like that student is supported, because they wouldn't use that data then to say, well, they didn't get it, because they actually don't have those numbers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And the support is very fluid throughout the school.
Right. No, I understand.
So, on a day where, let's say we've completed a rubric for a student who is a level 3.
Yeah.
And they require a little bit more support on that specific day, then the school will be giving that student that additional support, whether it is through an educational assistant, whether it is through like a CYC or, the CERT. So we do wrap around that student in order to give them what they need.
And then you're doing an assessment now, moving forward in September as well.
Yes.
A reassessment.
Yeah, so during that time frame, so as Jen had mentioned before, is that we also look at numbers. So any students that have not come back to the board in September, so during that first week, we know that many students may move, they might be moving into different districts. So we look at those numbers, we take that information back, we remove it from the actual algorithm, and then we input the new rubrics in.
Yeah, and then so that we're capturing any changes. And Brenda, I want you to know, I'm really hearing what you're saying about student voice and all that. And it may just be an additional piece that we don't have yet, that we haven't done in response to all of this data yet. And that I maybe named this incorrectly. Like the student narrative piece really is meant just to figure out allocation. And it was student narrative in the sense that we have kids who really do need more than one EA, and we have to be able to allocate it. We couldn't call it SIP because that was a ministry term. So maybe it was in the naming of it, but I think, we're really hearing what you're saying about student voice in the building. It just may be something outside or different than what this was intended to be.
And just again, on the student narrative piece, think about how you're going to elicit that information. Again, because I'm thinking about those students who historically, and I don't mean to pigeonhole anybody, but historically those students who do require previous SIP claims require additional EA support. They are our most complex students. Yeah. We often see behavioral challenges or communication challenges or whatnot. So just some thought around how to elicit that information in a tangible, impactful way so that you actually can inform some of the allocations that you're making. If you're going to incorporate that piece, just make sure it's actually, intentional and meaningful.
Yeah, and that's why we are trying to use a very accurate student timetable to see all the times throughout the day when that student is requiring the additional support. As opposed to just giving them a random amount, we're really trying to say, do you need a little more? Do you need a little less? And really that was the intention of the student narrative process, was a way to figure out how do we give schools more accurate amounts of support.
I know.
That's good.
And ironically, when we talked about the fall, like looking at the numbers in the fall, we had also discussed the potential to run it for term 2, but because we had captured all the needs in term 1 and we're working so closely with all of the schools, we haven't had to redo a run in term 2, but we've kind of had that as our benchmark as potential. This year might be an exception. Maybe it's something we have to revisit in years that follow, but ever responsive. So thank you.
Thank you. No, obviously important conversations. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So I know we probably need a movement break, but I'm going to power through. So the fourth item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from December 11th. So if we can have, and that should also be included in your package. If we can have a mover.
Okay.
Trish.
I'll second Mandy.
Okay. Quick. And summary of outstanding items from previous meeting. There is in your package, I think it's labeled 44. Some of the ongoing business arising from previous meetings. I know from the accessibility plan that we did send out an invitation that there is a meeting. No. Invitation coming. I had connected with a staff member, but they're on a leave right now, so that was paused. But we will be doing that shortly. The committee list. We're good. Okay. And then the SEAC pro-grant subcommittee. I know that was a conversation in our November meeting. I don't know if there's some conversation that we want to participate in terms of next steps.
We haven't had a meeting yet.
We haven't had a meeting yet, so okay. So we'll leave it at that. Okay, so this is the moment. Oh, there's no policy review. We did have a policy review. It did invoke some rich conversation. We were successful in incorporating all the changes, suggestions that came from multiple data sources. So thank you so much. The only other policy that I believe that we have on review doesn't take place until May. I've included it in my summary so that you can take a look at it, poke holes at that. The earlier the better, because we were getting such rich feedback up until several days before the policy. So that's something we can keep on the horizon. So the reason why I'm chairing is because we have the honor of electing a chair and vice chair for the 24 remainder of the 24 year from January 2024 to December 2024. So I will shift over to my next script. And I won't read the sentence, I had memorized it. Okay, so the next sentence is, should a vote by secret ballot become necessary this evening, Jennifer Thompson, who we've come to know very well, special education coordinator, will act as scrutineer while I tabulate any of the ballots. All of the ballots, members will cast their vote by means of a paper ballot, which Margaret Heath has, and the ballots shall be counted. So at this time, making sure everyone's back in their seats, a call for nomination for chair of the Special Education Advisory Committee for the term of January 2024 to December 2024. We will now proceed with the election of the chair of the Special Education Advisory Committee. I'm officially calling for nominations for the chair of the Special Education Advisory Committee for the term of January 2024 to December 2024. Amanda?
I'd like to nominate Brenda Agnew for chair.
Okay.
I would second that.
Okay, so we have a nomination and a seconder. Trish is the seconder. Okay. Brenda, do you accept this nomination?
Sorry.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. Yes, sure.
I'll take the sure as a yes. Are there any other nominations for the chair of Special Education Advisory Committee for the term of January 2024 to December 2024? And I will now make a final call for nominations. Bueller, no, okay. Hearing no other nominations, it does affirm that Brenda Agnew will be the chair of the Special Education Advisory Committee for the term of January 2024 to December 2024. Congratulations. Would you like to say anything? No.
I continue to do my best. Thank you.
Thank you. I will move on to the second page of my script. This is for the call for the vice chair of the Special Education Advisory Committee for the term of January 2024 to December 2024. I am officially calling for nominations for the vice chair of the Special Education Advisory Committee for the term of January 2024 to December 2024. Rick?
Sorry.
Okay, so we have a nomination. Rick, a seconder?
I would second that.
Okay,
Oh,
we had
Rhonda.
many people seconding, so overwhelming seconders. Are there, do you accept this nomination, Rick?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So I'm going to go through the rest of my script. Are there any other nominations for the vice chair of the Special Education Advisory Committee for the term of January 2024 to December 2024? I will now make a final call for nominations. Hearing no other nominations, it does affirm that Rick will be the vice chair of the Special Education Advisory Committee for the term January 2024 to December 2024. Congratulations, and would you like to say anything?
Just echoing Brenda, I'll do my best to support the chair and the committee. Thank you. Thank you.
Wonderful. So I can't pass this off quickly enough. Here's your script. So I now turn over the chair duties officially to our newly elected chair of SEAC.
Everyone. You did a great job. Okay, so item number 8, board committee updates from SEAC representatives. I don't know if we have any board updates for meetings. I know we have a BPI meeting tomorrow, correct, Andrea?
Yeah, there's a meeting tomorrow.
Right, and then we have an E&I committee on Wednesday. Is there any other committee meetings that have transpired that people are on that we don't know about? I don't think, yeah. And do you know, am I missing one? Anybody? No? Okay. All right. So we're good for that. So we'll bring back any updates at our next meeting. Thank you for that. And now we get to go back over communication to SEAC. So our superintendent report is next.
Okay, so I hope that you had a chance to review the minutes. I'm going to just do a high level review of some updates as opposed to going through all the itemized items, because we had such a rich discussion during our presentations, and I know it's getting late. So in the recognition, I've included all the days that we recognize this month, and wanted to also turn our attention to next month, which starts this Thursday, if you can believe it, which is Black History Month. And we've been actually in partnership with Program and Human Rights and Equity. We'll be part of a campaign called Black History Month 365, where they're developing a lot of resources for school use, particularly in the high school, but also in the elementary schools, some resources. And we've had the task of making sure that they're accessible to all of our learners. So whether it's, taking some of the concepts and streamlining them, but making sure that Black history is part of the curriculum for all of our students. Special Olympics organization, school Halton bocce qualifiers will be taking place March 4th. So I'll have a bit more information at our next meeting, but because it is so close to the March 4th deadline, I thought I would include it in this month's update. We do have a date tentatively for this, it's a spring thing, maybe not a spring fling, that's happening April 17th, Best Buddies Dance. We had to navigate a few liturgical obligations with being Lent. So this year we had Lent, we had solar eclipses. So we've had a number of things that we're trying to navigate. So we've arrived at that date. It will take place at Holy Trinity, and the details will be shared well in advance. And I already mentioned that the Best Buddies is being, I guess, audited or surveyed by our student trustees. And they've requested some time to share their findings. So you'll be very interested to hear from a student voice perspective what we are doing well and where are some areas that we can improve upon. And I'll make sure to turn my attention especially to assumption, give them a hard time there. But we also have the life skills prom that is in the works, but we wanted to get through the spring thing before we share the details about the life skills prom, but they'll be relatively close together because we're running out of runway as far as the school year, if you can believe it. I've included the new policy that we've vetted, discussed at length at our last meeting. The other policy that will be up for review from this department is with regards to IPRC. So I think that's going to be a good, rich conversation. And I've included a SEAC letter, I believe, from one of our neighboring boards. I think that it was sent out to you, but put it all in one place so you don't have to comb through your emails. Project search and information meeting will be taking place on tomorrow, January 30th, as well as a collaboration with Halton District. The posters included about anti-sex trafficking. And we've also included the special education parent information night for students who are registering in kindergarten. We have a lot of consultant updates. So new CERT CLC, the fourth one was held on January 19th. Topics included transition, case conferences, specialized classes, gifted process, allocation, hot topic of EAs, IPRC considerations, and the mindset. Empower CLC also took place for Itinerant Empower certs. That was held on January 25th. Topics included a review of the Fly Leaf reading program and current Empower research reports, which we benefited from today. The ESC CLC day number 2 was held on January 18th. Topics included social and emotional well-being strategies, community pathway and transition to secondary and beyond, highlights of the language arts curriculum, and a presentation on AI. We also had some SIA training. So there were in-person training sessions from LearnStyle on November the 27th, and the focus was on Board Maker. Boardmaker is an electronic resource platform used by all special education teachers and educational assistants to create and share resources for students with communication and structural teaching needs. I actually have a sample. I'm going to pass that around shortly. And the SEAC consultant attended the annual SEA GTA Network Conference, which was held January 19th. Topics included accessibility, artificial intelligence, reading interventions, accessible math, and virtual reality in the classroom. Some additional information about Project Search. And we have developed, I think we mentioned earlier on in the year, American Sign Language Land Acknowledgement. I went one step further and we have a Braille version too. So I thought I could pass it around so you could take a look, and you know, the symbols that I was just talking about, they're also on the land acknowledgement. So the next step is we're connecting with communications. Communicating with communications is what I was going to say, to roll out a recording of the ASL version of the land acknowledgement, and then like I said, we'll have the Braille version also adapted and sent out to schools. So I don't know, I'll probably go do this way and then make its way around. Really, really proud of that work and joint effort as well. I talked about talked about the Lenten season. So we do know that some of our students with diverse needs, Lent and Easter, they're quite disorienting and challenging concepts. So we have you know, a number of resources that we're sharing with schools to help support students, and hoping that if there's interest that we share it with parents as well, so they can assist with students at home. I know for many students, although it's you know, the foundation of our faith, it's a very difficult concept for our students to understand. So it's important work. I already talked about our Black History 365. We have some candidates from some of the colleges. So we have some EA placements taking place, some future employees, we hope, to help with our growing and our needs in our system. So we're really fortunate to continually get requests from colleges to have students placed in our system. And we do have a February 16th PA Day. On that PA Day, we will be having Dr. Jody Carrington. She'll be leading the EAs in conversation. They do such meaningful work, and we're hoping that this will help, you know, recognize the hard work that our EAs are doing, but also provide some morale boosts and to really engage in some good conversation around the work that we're doing. And the need to feel seen is the theme. So I think that that'll be a well-received message on that day. Okay, our senior manager of speech and language. So on January 22nd, the BAs met with Erin Oak, along with Denise, based on rehabilitation services occupational therapists, to share information about service delivery models and explore opportunities to collaborate with our students. On January 17th, the Blind Low Vision team provided a half day of professional development to educators who have students with visual impairments in their classes. On January 17th, the secondary VP, special education department head and CERT, and the FASD lead presented to staff about supporting students with FASD in secondary school as part of our after school special topics and FASD series, which is very well received. Gifted screening stage 1 has been completed, and stage 2 will begin January 29th, which is today, so started today. And then some updates on our school mental health. Student mental health champions will be meeting for the second time this year on February 8th at St. FX Secondary School. The focus will be each secondary school team creating one school-wide mental health initiative to implement this spring. On January 10th and 17th, 8 CYCs were trained in Stop Now and Plan, called SNAP. All elementary CYCs are now trained in this Tier 1 program that focuses on problem solving, conflict resolution, and emotional regulation for students in grades 3 to 6. There are a few collaborations that are taking place. Burlington Firefighters, Halton Region, Headstrong, Mental Health Commission of Canada offering a student mental health summit. That'll take place next month for students in Burlington schools. That was the region, I guess, with the Burlington Firefighters. They've partnered with that region. And with other community partners, they will generously donate money to support this opportunity for students, and each school is able to send 10 to 15 students to attend. Assist training, applied suicide intervention skills training, is also being offered for the second time this year, tomorrow and Wednesday. This training is focused on building awareness, skills, and intervention. Staff will learn how to recognize when someone may be thinking about suicide, how to provide a skilled intervention, and develop a safety plan with the person to connect them to further support. And it's difficult work, but it's important work. And I think just recently, especially with the Bell Let's Talk, we've seen certainly a lot of data to support the need for this important work. And from our coordinator, Corpus Christi received a renovation over Christmas break to open 2 spaces, which created a more collaborative space for our life skills students. We do hope that that doesn't mean other schools are going to come knocking for renovations, but we try to respond as much as we can to those needs. A department head meeting was held where they received a number of system updates, including presentations on Bach Fit, Regional Assessment and Resource Center, and ministry projects and experiential learning opportunities. And we talked at length about the independence rubric, so I'm going to skip that part over. And there was a conference, a virtual conference at OCASE. Lori French from LDCSB, a school math facilitator on the science of math, and a special education kindergarten parent information night, which I shared the flyer, will take place on April 4th. We will be, I put on the agenda, and it's a topic that we add to all of our agendas now about being culturally responsive and looking at the implications from our equity audit. So there's some collaborative work that we're doing with the Human Rights and Equity Department, but certainly at there's cross sections for all of our departments to work together to make sure that we are ensuring the equity of access to all of our students, and looking at some of the recommendations from the equity audit that will be part of our work, driving our work this year as well. And that's a wrap from me. Any questions? Okay, sorry, just one question.
Well, two, maybe 3. Just a quick question about the Best Buddies dance. So I know that, so I'm glad to hear that's happening, because I know that there wasn't an opportunity for a Christmas event. So hopefully there will be next year. So just a question, in lieu of, as was mentioned today, in lieu of not having a Best Buddy program at a school, are those life skills students still invited to attend that event? Yes. Okay. So it doesn't matter if there's Best Buddies or not. It's a life skills.
Correct.
Okay. Just hosted by Best Buddies?
Yeah.
Okay. And how is that funded? Do each of the schools give money to the host school to assist with the cost of that event?
So yes, the schools do fund it by paying a per student fee, but we're also soliciting donations from our community, both cash and prizes. So there's a committee together that's been put together under the leadership of Andrea Jones, one of our EA managers, to sort of coordinate that work.
Thanks, Denise. And is that communicated out? Like, do family, like who, is it just communicated to life skills family, or do we communicate that out to the community to solicit those donations? And
so we have a small but mighty group that is starting to solicit those. We are open to suggestions and help from anybody who would like to. So
I'm thinking, like, if there was a way for the principals of the high schools to put that in a newsletter, to put that in an email of information. I mean, we certainly get lots of emails asking for donations to lots of other things at the schools. I think that a life skills event would be a great would be a great place to donate that. So maybe some suggestion for that. I don't know if you can send that out to your admin.
Fran? Yeah. Or even if you have information that we could share.
Yeah. We'll share.
I'm happy to post something or.
So we're just in the very early stages.
We're so excited.
Like maybe 20, like we're talking like 24 hours still. Just, I found out about
All right.
the date today. So I know that the group is just starting to really kind of come together and start to do that work. And then also in terms of the funding this year, there is some ministry funding around removing barriers, which this is an opportunity to remove some barriers for our students to be able to participate. So we are using some of that funding to help fund transportation for all students across the board to a local spot without having to put it on the school for that as well. So
I was going to say, I paused before Denise jumped in. I was like, well, we've got some creative budgeting happening.
No, that's important. I think, again, speaking to everything we've spoken about this evening, I think that's great. I'm happy to donate. So yeah, if you can send information, whenever you have that.
Yeah.
We can definitely help. We can get it out on Twitter. We can get it out in a variety of different ways. So please use us to communicate that, even back to our organizations. That'd be great. And then the life skills prom, it's going to happen. It just is a matter of when and where, right? Okay, awesome.
I thought I saw a hand up. Sorry, I have too many screens open. Brianna, was it? Okay. Sorry, yes, Brianna. And then Trish, did you want a question asked as well? No? I'm imagining.
Thanks. I just want to jump. I appreciate that you said that you send the invitation out to all schools to the best buddies. But keep in mind, when you don't know anybody going to the dance, right? They don't feel included. It's uncomfortable. So it's really important, like, to be able to have a partner to go with, right? Someone you can talk to, enjoy. I mean, I forced my son, and it was just fortunate enough that the EA hung out with them the whole entire dance. He had a great and wonderful time with the EA, but that wasn't the purpose of, I wanted him to socialize and meet other people, and the opportunity wasn't there because they're not comfortable doing it just on their own, right? So having that person, that peer beside you, kind of gives you a bit of courage, or they can help initiate it and you kind of follow through. So with not every school having a best buddies, it still leaves out a group of students, I feel. That's just my 2 cents.
Was there any other questions for the superintendent report? No? Okay, great. Okay, trustee report.
Well, not much left. I think I should go first. No, I'm just like, okay, strike that off. No, we just have a couple things from it was a short month for meetings. We only had a policy and a regular board meeting. You've heard it mentioned about the multi-year strategic plan coming up. Well, we've approved the change. It is now 4 pillars. We've got believing, belonging, becoming, and achieving. So that was, we've all had our say in that, I think, over the last 2 years. So that's nice to kind of get that finalized and feel now we just got to follow through on it all. So what else was not mentioned? There is a change of PA dates to April 8th from April 22nd. That came up at one of our meetings, as well as just in the high schools, the student trustees held their elections for the 23-24 school year. School nominees were last Friday, and elections are coming up Wednesday, February 21st. And the student trustees, they're just such great advocates for kids with all different needs. I feel like the students do a great job. Their student trustees do a great job of speaking up for everyone. And then exams began last week and continue through to this week. Some of the schools have CYCs and social workers, or either or, and they've got some really interesting creative outlets going on and ways to de-stress. St. John Ambulance brought in therapy dogs for students to pet and play. And I mean, I know my son just loves the dogs. So it's a cool, neat opportunity for kids to be around dogs and know that, I don't know, there's just this feeling of content. And then they have different, I think they had like friendship bracelets going on in one room. They had another room where kids can just come in and not even think about exams. They can just play ping pong and relax. So a couple different outlets happening during exam week. And really that's it. So thank you, Superintendent, for covering everything and more.
Great, thank you. Is there any questions at all on the trustee report? No? Okay, perfect. Okay, moving on to item 9.3. So we did have a motion to include, and I'm sorry, can you please assist me? Is just Marianne? Marianne, perfect. Happy to have you and look forward to having you at our upcoming meetings.
And if I'll quickly introduce her. So just so you guys know who she is. So she's a member of the Down syndrome son, who's actually better today. So she stayed home to take care of him and make sure that none of us got sick. But she's going to be sharing the role in representing Halton Down Syndrome Association. Just with busy lives and everything going on, we feel we can accomplish more as a team. So I'm super grateful to her for joining and being able to represent Halton Down Syndrome Association. And we hope to do a presentation for you later in the year that helps with that. And yeah, just welcome as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we're happy to have you join us. The more the merrier. So thank you for the introduction, and it'll be great to have for both of you to have some support when you need to trade off. So that's great. So welcome. We look forward to seeing you at the next meeting. Hopefully your son feels better soon. Moving on to item number 10, which is SEAC discussion item questions. I didn't have anything submitted. Did anybody have anything they wanted to bring forward this evening? I'm seeing shaking heads. Okay. Perfect. Meeting summary and next steps. We have a couple of follow-ups on some things to get out. So we'll go ahead and make sure that we're following up on anything we talked about today and get that information out. As always, if you have any questions at all on the presentations you saw this evening, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or reach out to the superintendent, and we can try to answer those questions for you. Our next meeting is Monday, February the 26th. And resolution re-absentees. Did we have any regrets sent in this evening? Okay, great. So if I could just get a motion then for absenteeism, if I can get a mover. Jessica, thank you. Okay, and a seconder. Thanks, Rick. Appreciate that. Okay, and now adjournment and closing prayer. So if I can get a motion to adjourn. Rick, thank you.
I'll second.
Seconded by Trish. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, and if you'll join me in the sign of our faith, in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Blessed are you, O God of all creation. Each day you spread before us the rich and wonderful diversity of the human family created in the divine splendor of your love. Fashioned in your image, you call us to love one another with the same tender care with which you brought us to creation. Each one of us is but one small part of the glory that is you. As we serve the students and families of the Halton Catholic District School Board on the Special Education Advisory Committee, fill us with your grace, guide us with your wisdom, and give us the strength and courage to do your work, so that it may always be said of our every act, God saw that it was good. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.